Hey heroes, and welcome to another mercantile episode of History of the Marvel Universe. This channel is sponsored in part by Patreon supporters. If you would like to contribute and vote in monthly polls that help decide what topics get covered on the channel, then you can sign up for an event of your choosing over at patreon.com/MaryMarvelite. The link is in the description below, along with other places you can find me. This week we're looking at a man named Georges Batroc. Born in Marseille, France, the details of his parentage and upbringing are as of yet unknown to the public, but it seems to be the case that he was a naturally athletic individual, possessing both a twisted sense of honor and a flair for the dramatic. After completing his secondary education, he enlisted as a soldier in the French Foreign Legion, during which time he began training himself in a form of kickboxing known as savate, a martial art that he ultimately mastered. However, it seems that Batroc was an ambitious and prideful fellow who constantly strove to be the best. Leaving the military to become a mercenary, he continually trained himself in various disciplines, eventually becoming proficient in virtually all forms of unarmed combat. Furthermore, he constantly pushed himself to the limits of what a man was capable of until he had honed his strength, speed, and reflexes to the point where he was capable of performing feats of acrobatics that bordered on the superhuman. Donning a colorful costume to distinguish himself and incorporating powerful bounding leaps into his fighting style, he soon became known as Batroc the Leaper, and gained a reputation as a formidable international mercenary. While he presumably had a number of missions under his belt before this, the earliest job that we know the details of was one in which he was hired by a shadowy organization to retrieve an extremely powerful incendiary chemical known as Inferno 42, which had been stolen from them by the international espionage agency SHIELD. I will note that Batroc's mysterious employers for this job were secretly members of Advanced Idea Mechanics, but this was back when AIM was effectively a division of Hydra, operating under the auspices of a central committee known simply as them. In any event, Batroc attempted to seize the chemical from SHIELD agent Sharon Carter, who was responsible for transporting it, but was interrupted by the intervention of Captain America. Delighted at the opportunity to test himself against a famous hero, Batroc eagerly leapt into battle, but soon found that the living legend of World War II actually lived up to the legend. Furthermore, during their fight, the canister containing the Inferno 42 was damaged when Batroc dropped it, allowing Agent Carter to grab it and flee in an attempt to complete her mission by delivering it to SHIELD. Thankfully, Batroc had been briefed on how volatile the chemical was and warned Captain America that if they didn't find it again quickly, it could explode with enough force to destroy the entire city. After working with Captain America to find Carter once again, Batroc seemingly succeeded in seizing the canister and bringing it back to AIM in time for them to prevent it from detonating. He was, however, followed by Captain America, and while the Leaper was outmatched by his star-spangled foe, he ultimately escaped, not wanting to be anywhere close if AIM actually used their incendiary weapon. What he didn't know, however, was that at some point in the midst of all of this, the canister had been swapped for a fake, allowing SHIELD to safely seal away the Inferno 42, while AIM were left with a harmless decoy. Sometime after that, Batroc sought a rematch with Captain America and worked with Hydra proper to lure him into a trap by abducting Sharon Carter. Sure enough, the star-spangled hero came to save the captive SHIELD agent, and Batroc attacked him once again, intending to face Captain America alone. In the ensuing battle, however, Hydra broke their agreement with Batroc by trying to kill Captain America while the two were still fighting, and ironically it was Batroc's warning that saved the hero's life. Annoyed by this interference and their lack of honor, Batroc turned against the Hydra agents and even helped Captain America find and rescue the captive Carter. Of course, he immediately escaped again, insisting that their next battle would go uninterrupted. After that, Batroc began partnering with other costumed mercenaries, starting with a fellow Frenchman, Jacques Duquesne, aka the Swordsman, and an American criminal named Arthur Parks, better known as the Living Laser. Together, this trio attempted to find a weapon called a seismo bomb that had been hidden in New York by a foreign agent, so that they could sell it to another country for a tidy profit. Of course, as fate would have it, US military officials tasked Captain America with finding the bomb first, causing him to clash with Batroc once again. In the ensuing conflict, Captain America defeated both the Swordsman and the Living Laser, and while Batroc the Leaper tracked down the seismo bomb, he soon learned that it had already been armed. As such, he decided to cut his losses and take a powder, leaving Captain America to disarm the bomb while Batroc escaped. After that, Batroc formed a new brigade, recruiting the mutant criminal David Cannon, aka Whirlwind, and the disgraced weapons designer Alex Gentry, aka the Porcupine. Now, I will note that while Batroc's previous team-up is generally considered the first iteration of the mercenary group known as Batroc's Brigade, this trio was the first to actually use that name. Hired by a masked man calling himself the Hood, this group attacked Captain America during a live television broadcast, but were unable to defeat him before the authorities arrived, and ultimately fled once again. I should note that the Hood involved in that incident was not the one that some of you might be thinking of, Parker Robbins, who more famously adopted the same alias some years later. This Hood was actually the infamous Nazi war criminal and Hydra leader Baron Wolfgang von Strucker, or to be more accurate, an android duplicate of Baron Strucker that was built by the criminal roboticist Samuel Saxon, better known as the Machine Smith. But getting back to the story at hand, for the next incarnation of Batroc's Brigade, Georges forwent hiring costumed criminals entirely, and instead recruited a gang of hired goons to aid him. During this time, Batroc took a job from an anonymous stranger, abducting children from orphanages and poor neighborhoods with the belief that they would be held for ransom. This, however, caught the attention of Captain America and his partner, Sam Wilson, the Falcon, who intervened in the operation. Furthermore, it turned out that Batroc's secretive employer for this job was not a mere extortionist, but actually an other-dimensional alien known as Jakar, who wanted to extract the children's souls and use them to revive his own people, who had succumbed to some sort of galactic plague. I will note that during this time, Jakar briefly impersonated the enigmatic alien entity known only as the Stranger, claiming that there was some sort of connection between them, but their resemblance was apparently illusory. That's another topic entirely, but for all the details you can refer to my video on the Stranger himself, linked in the description below. Getting back to the matter at hand, after learning that the captive children would be sacrificed, Batroc regretted his actions and decided to go after Jakar alone, while his goons battled Captain America and the Falcon. Things didn't exactly go as planned, as Batroc was defeated and taken captive by Jakar, but before too long he was rescued by Captain America and the Falcon, and the three joined forces against the alien threat. Although that battle didn't actually end until Cap helped Jakar see the error of his ways. The children were freed, and the Falcon ensured that Batroc was handed over to the police, but he didn't remain in custody for long. After that, he continued to expand his mercenary company, and the next version of Batroc's Brigade included dozens of trained martial artists. During this time, Batroc was contracted by the unscrupulous businessman Ward Meacham, who hired Batroc's Brigade to eliminate the masked martial artist Iron Fist. However, in the ensuing conflict, Iron Fist was aided by an enigmatic ninja who sought to keep him alive for his own purposes. We'll avoid going on an overly lengthy tangent about the ninja here, but the short version is that he was an ancient Japanese warrior whose soul had been sealed in an arcane tome called the Book of Many Things. At the time, this book was in the possession of Iron Fist's ally, Professor Lee Wing, and the ninja was able to escape his prison for limited periods by secretly possessing Professor Wing's body. Anyway, all that is to say that the ninja knew that Iron Fist would unknowingly serve his purposes by protecting his unwitting host from harm, and when Batroc's Brigade attacked Iron Fist, the ninja possessed Professor Wing and came to his aid. Suffice it to say, Batroc failed to eliminate his target, and while he demanded the agreed-upon payment to compensate the families of the men he'd lost at the hands of the ninja, Meacham refused to pay the full amount. After that, Batroc laid low for a time, living luxuriously off of ill-gotten gains while he waited for another opportunity to distinguish himself. Meanwhile, Captain America and the Falcon got into a conflict with a group known as the Night People of Zero Street, who regularly traveled between Earth and an alien dimension known as the Mad Dimension, or sometimes Dimension Zero. Okay, this is admittedly going to be a little bit of a tangent, but I don't know when I'm going to be able to talk about the Night People again, so indulge me for a minute. The Night People were originally patients in a psychiatric hospital on Manhattan's Zero Street until the entire facility was transported to Dimension Zero by Dr. Abner Doolittle, aka Brother Wonderful, a nuclear physicist who was also a patient there after suffering a nervous breakdown, but was allowed to continue his research. Using Brother Wonderful's dimension machine, the Night People made trips to Earth to gather food, supplies, and whatever else interested them. However, the Mad Dimension they resided in was also home to a race of monstrous fire-breathing creatures. When one such monster threatened the Night People, they abducted the Falcon and brainwashed him into joining them as a brother superhero, which of course led to Captain America finding them when he went looking for his missing partner. That whole situation came to a head when even more of Dimension Zero's monstrous inhabitants attacked the former psychiatric hospital where the Night People lived. Brother Wonderful intended on defending his home by using his dimension machine to banish the creatures to Earth. However, he was only successful in transporting one of the attackers before being thwarted by Captain America, who instead got the Night People back to Earth and sent the dimension machine to self-destruct before any more monsters could follow. This brings us back to the story at hand as Georges Batroc, while laying low in New York, caught sight of the one creature that did get sent to Earth from the Mad Dimension. Seeing this as an opportunity, the French mercenary approached the interdimensional monster and offered his hand in friendship, successfully taming the beast. Naming the creature Diable after the French word for devil, Batroc attempted to use his new friend to steal a shipment of trans-uranium from S.H.I.E.L.D. Unfortunately for him, his efforts were thwarted by the intervention of Spider-Man and Captain America. This time Batroc was arrested and taken into S.H.I.E.L.D. custody, and while Diable's body began leaking alien radiation, the creature was ultimately slain by Captain America before it caused any further harm. After that, there was an incident in which an aspiring filmmaker named Aaron English, better known as Dollar Bill, produced an unauthorized documentary on the loose-knit superhero group The Defenders, which claimed that anyone with superpowers who declared themselves a member would automatically become one. Seeking to take advantage of this, Sagittarius and Libra, both members of the infamous Zodiac cartel, each assembled a group of villains to embark on a crime spree while calling themselves Defenders. And Batroc the Leaper was recruited by Sagittarius. I will note that over the years there have been multiple iterations of the Zodiac cartel, and so for clarity, this is one that was made up of life model decoys designed by Nick Fury's brother Jacob, and so technically this Sagittarius was not a person but a lifelike android. Anyway, that whole scheme led to a confrontation between the fake Defenders and the real ones, whose ranks had been temporarily bolstered by other heroes thanks to Dollar Bill's unauthorized membership drive, and in the scuffle Batroc the Leaper clashed with the White Tiger Hector Ayala. Things got pretty chaotic, but that battle came to an end when the evil mutant known as the Blob tried to strangle the Defender Hellcat, causing her to lash out with psychic abilities that she had developed after training with the telepath Moondragon. In the wake of that debacle, Batroc apparently starred in a briefly run advertising campaign for the eccentric publication Crazy Magazine while rebuilding his mercenary company. When the superhuman criminal, Mr. Hyde, offered $5 million to anyone who could free him from prison, Batroc successfully orchestrated his escape, only to learn that Hyde didn't actually have the money. To make up for this, Hyde convinced Batroc to join forces with him in a scheme to hijack a Roxxon supertanker called the Queen of Egypt and use it to blackmail all of New York. But upon learning that Hyde intended on destroying the city whether or not they got paid, Batroc turned on his partner and joined forces with Captain America to stop him. After saving the city, Batroc attempted to escape with the ransom money, but Captain America ensured that he was apprehended by the Coast Guard, thwarting him once again. Of course, he eventually resurfaced with yet another incarnation of Batroc's Brigade, once again partnering with two other costumed mercenaries. This time it was Ferdinand Lopez, aka Machete, a revolutionary from the South American Republic of San Diablo, who became a mercenary to help fund the revolt. And Maximilian Zarin, aka the Weapons Master, a former MI6 agent who for a time had a romantic entanglement with a woman that he knew as Fa Lo Sui, the daughter of the infamous Chinese crime lord Zheng Zhu, known at the time as Fu Manchu. I will note that Fa Lo Sui was also an alias and that her real name was Zheng Bao Yu, and I will apologize for my pronunciation on all of that. In any event, she secretly worked with MI6 to oppose her father and used Zarin for her own purposes, but when internal strife and restructuring left Fa Lo Sui in charge of the organization, she ended her relationship with Zarin, declaring that he was an embarrassment. Seeking new purpose, Zarin then became a mercenary and was of course recruited into Batroc's Brigade. This version of the team was then hired by Obadiah Stane to steal Captain America's shield, a task that Batroc entrusted to Machete and Zarin, who actually succeeded. After delivering the shield to Stane International, the trio of mercenaries went out for drinks to celebrate, and Zarin wagered some of their earnings in an arm wrestling match with Batroc, who soundly defeated him. Annoyed, Zarin and Machete mocked Batroc for not helping with the actual mission, pointing out that he had never actually defeated Captain America himself, and the two men bet the remainder of their earnings that he couldn't. More than a little tipsy, Batroc accepted their wager and set out to prove himself by challenging the captain again. And in the ensuing fight, Captain America offered to let Batroc take a free swing at him if he told him where his shield was first. Batroc agreed, spilling the beans on who his employer was, and Captain America, true to his word, let the inebriated mercenary take a flying leap at him. Suffice it to say, the blow he landed was painful, knocking Cap off his feet, but not quite enough to keep him down, and the hero soon got back up and knocked Batroc out with a single punch. Having witnessed this from the sidelines, Zarin and Machete quickly collected their winnings from the unconscious Frenchman and fled into the night, while Captain America left to get his shield back from Stane. After that defeat, Batroc was recruited into a short-lived iteration of the Lethal Legion assembled by his old allies, Whirlwind and Porcupine, and was one of 99 supervillains to make up Mephisto's Legion Accursed during the Second Secret Wars. However, he ultimately rejoined Zarin and Machete, the trio becoming the first recurring and most notable iteration of Batroc's Brigade. After that, they were hired by a criminal archer, Buck Chisholm, aka Trickshot, who sent them to attack his former protege, Hawkeye, in Paris, France. But despite being outnumbered, Hawkeye ultimately defeated his attackers single-handedly. Next, Batroc's Brigade were hired by Baron Helmut Zemo, who tasked them with stealing the skeletal remains of Ulysses Bloodstone from the Museum of Natural History, a mission they accomplished handily. Now, we've talked about Ulysses Bloodstone on the channel before, but it's been a while, so as a quick recap, he was born thousands of years ago during the Hyborean Age. Circa 8250 BCE, he had an encounter with an alien entity protecting a powerful artifact called the Blood Gem, which was created by ancient gods in a previous incarnation of the cosmos. Linked to an interdimensional energy nexus called the Hellfire Helix that produced an intelligence known as the Exomind, this stone endowed Ulysses with greatly increased strength, but when he attempted to share this gift with the rest of his tribe, the cosmic energies threatened to overwhelm their minds. And so to save his people, Ulysses destroyed the blood gem, shattering it into fragments, one of which became embedded in his sternum. As a result, Ulysses was rendered virtually immortal, and over the following millennia he became a renowned monster hunter known as Ulysses Bloodstone. During the Marvel Age, however, he clashed with a group known as the Conspiracy, who sought to reassemble the blood gem and succeeded in surgically removing the fragment in Ulysses Bloodstone's chest. Now, in the end, the blood gem's exomind absorbed the souls of the Conspiracy members and formed the blood gem itself into a crystalline body, but Ulysses was kept alive by residual blood gem energy in his body just long enough to destroy this creature, shattering the gem once again and apparently scattering several fragments across the globe. But without his own blood gem fragment to sustain him, Ulysses was ultimately reduced to a skeleton that wound up being brought to the Museum of Natural History until it was stolen by Batroc's Brigade. As for why Zemo wanted it, well, what he really wanted was the bone where the blood gem fragment had been lodged for thousands of years, since with the help of a psychic detective, Tristram Macabre, it could be used as a sort of divining rod to find the 5 scattered pieces. And of course, Batroc's Brigade agreed to join Zemo in his worldwide quest when he offered them a substantial sum for every fragment they helped him obtain. The first piece was easy enough since it was still in the Conspiracy's lair in Manhattan. However, the search for the second brought the villains to the Amazonian jungle, where they were captured by a hidden Incan tribe who'd found it first. Ironically, they only escaped from that situation because Captain America and his ally Diamondback had learned what they were up to and pursued them there. Those two were briefly captured by the hidden tribe as well, but Captain America broke free and saved all of the captives from execution. And in the confusion, Zemo and Batroc's Brigade took their opportunity to escape with the blood gem fragment. They tracked the third piece to a sunken jet in the waters of Bermuda, where both groups were attacked by ravenous sharks. Ironically, when Captain America was left to fend off a group of these animals alone, Batroc felt that it was a terrible shame for a great fighter to go out in such a manner, and ultimately came to Captain America's aid, saving the hero's life before escaping with the rest of his crew. The two groups next traveled to Egypt, where Captain America and Diamondback encountered the living mummy, Nkantu, who we talked about on the channel years ago, and finally Tokyo, Japan, where Batroc's Brigade found the final blood gem fragment. In the end, Zemo succeeded in assembling the 5 fragments and used them in an attempt to resurrect his deceased father, the notorious Nazi scientist Baron Heinrich Zemo. Upon doing so, however, the Hellfire Helix's exomind seized control of Heinrich's body and intended on using it to conquer the Earth. When that happened, Batroc's Brigade immediately tried to escape, leaving Captain America and Zemo to deal with this whole mess. In the end, another mercenary, Brock Rumlow, aka Crossbones, who had been hunting the fragments for the Red Skull, fired a crossbow bolt at the blood gem, shattering it once again, along with the skull of Heinrich Zemo's corpse, dropping both into an active volcano. I will of course note that some fragments of the gem survived, and one was later affixed to a choker and worn by Bloodstone's estranged daughter, Elsa, who followed in her father's footsteps to become a world-renowned monster hunter. In any event, Batroc actually met Crossbones at AIM's Weapons Expo on Boca Caliente, where the French mercenary was annoyed when Rumlow boasted that he was the best unarmed fighter there. Batroc then challenged Rumlow to prove this claim by taking on 5 opponents of his choosing at the following expo, and Crossbones agreed. In the meantime, Batroc was hired by the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk, and participated in a scheme to assassinate several underworld bosses across Europe. Teaming up with two other hired guns, Snakebite and Rapido, the latter of which was also a former member of the French Foreign Legion, Batroc had a few close encounters with the Punisher, Frank Castle, before ultimately battling Frank's ally, Luis Alvarez, aka the Tarantula, in London. Eager to face a fellow foot-focused fighter, Batroc nearly overpowered his opponent, but during their fight the Tarantula scratched Batroc with his venom-covered foot spike, and Batroc was forced to flee and obtain an anti-venom before it was too late. Surviving that encounter, Batroc reunited with Zarin and Machete and intended on making good on his arrangement with Crossbones at the next AIM Weapons Expo, having arranged 5 opponents for his fellow mercenary to face in front of an audience of their peers. However, the Crossbones that showed up was secretly Captain America in disguise, who had gone undercover to infiltrate the expo while the real Crossbones was in custody. As Crossbones, Cap was forced to face Mad Dog, aka Buzz Baxter, who regular viewers may remember as Patsy Walker's ex-husband, Ramrod, a cyborg with a steel skull who was previously a member of Madame McEvil's terrible trio, General Woe, a sumo wrestler who clashed with Captain America in Southeast Asia several years prior, Razor Fist, a mercenary whose hands had been replaced with twin blades, and finally Batroc himself, who leapt in after the supposed Crossbones had defeated the others in rapid succession. Having already recognized Captain America's fighting style, Batroc revealed that he had figured out who his opponent really was, and threatened to reveal his identity to the crowd if he didn't take a dive. Unwilling to yield, Captain America attempted to threaten Batroc into silence, but the French mercenary was undeterred and offered a bounty to any who took the hero down, forcing Cap to fight his way through a veritable army of supervillains. Of course, Captain America ultimately survived that ordeal, and Batroc has continued his mercenary career, sometimes partnering with Zarin and Machete as Batroc's Brigade, but not exclusively. I will note that the original Machete, Ferdinand Lopez, was later murdered by a costumed serial killer, Larry Eckler, aka Everyman, aka Zeitgeist, who primarily targeted superhumans but for a time owned his skills by hunting costumed adventurers across South America. After that, Ferdinand's brother Alfonso Lopez became the new Machete, taking his place on Batroc's Brigade and clashing with Hawkeye alongside Batroc and Zarin. That Machete was later captured by US Agent while trying to sell stolen alien technology to Hydra. And when Hydra goons opened fire on US Agent while he tried to escape with his prisoner and the tech, Alfonso was hit in the head by a stray bullet and killed almost immediately. After that, a third brother, Mariano Lopez, took over the Machete identity and his place in Batroc's Brigade. This Machete clashed with the Great Lakes Avengers when Batroc was hired by the deviant Inhuman hybrid Fader, and was also with the team when they later battled Mach 4's new Thunderbolts. As far as I can tell, Mariano has managed to keep himself alive, but a later iteration of Batroc's Brigade instead included an unidentified female version of Machete whose background is yet to be revealed. That version of Batroc's Brigade also included Rossel Dupont, aka Rapido, the former French Foreign Legionnaire who Batroc previously worked with while employed by the Kingpin in Europe. I also want to note that at some point Batroc had a daughter, Marie, who attempted to follow in her father's footsteps by becoming a mercenary alongside the Tarantula, Jacinda Rodriguez. For context, there have been a few Tarantulas over the years. The one that Batroc fought in London was the second Tarantula, Luis Alvarez. The one that Marie Batroc partnered with, however, was the daughter of the original Tarantula, Anton Miguel Rodriguez. In any event, Marie's debut outing went poorly when she was shot by the much more experienced mercenary Taskmaster, and while Jacinda has since resurfaced, it seems that Marie has yet to make another attempt at mercenary work. Okay, that's all I've got for you this week, but thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it on your favorite social media. As always, the issues referenced in this video are listed in the description below if you would like to read them for yourself, as well as links to other places you can find me. Let me give a special shout out to all of my Patreon and Ko-fi supporters, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members who help make the channel possible. By signing up for any ongoing amount on any of these platforms, you'll get your name in these special thanks here, but Patreon is the one that helps determine what topics get covered on the channel via monthly polls. And of course, I always need options to populate those polls, so if there's anything in particular that you want me to talk about, be sure to let me know in the comments. But that is indeed all I have for you this week, and so until next time, true believers, Excelsior!